All right, part 3 of our objection series is coming right up. Rachel and I dive into probably one of the most common, biggest objections that you'll ever face. It is impossible to avoid this objection, and it is the money objection. So we have a couple different ways of handling it, a couple different scenarios, a couple different questions and paths to take depending on what industry you're in, what happens, why the money objection is coming up, and we dive into this. This is like an hour-long call just on the money objection. So I'm really excited to dive into it. Let's just hop right in. If you want to learn how to overcome the money objection, well, keep on listening.
Hi, I'm Brandon Lucero, and you're about to experience the new way to thrive in business, entrepreneurship, and life by leaning into who you are, what you love, and standing up for what you want to create. Get ready, because this is where we go against the grain, say no to outdated society norms, and we say yes to change in order to create a happier, more fulfilled world. Welcome to the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. Today is day number 3 of our objection busting series. Well, not day number 3, episode number 3. And Rachel and I are back at it again. So Rachel, co-host for the series, welcome back to the podcast.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. Well, today we're going to talk about the money objection. And honestly, I think this is probably the one that most people face. Everyone's going to face it. It's like, it's impossible to be in sales and not get this objection. So it's going to be a good topic. No matter what business you're in, you're going to have this objection. And Rachel and I have been able to overcome this a lot, and we have a lot of different responses that we like using. And again, as we were talking before the episode, we started to realize we both have different ways of handling it and different questions we like to ask. So I think this is going to be a good episode. Where do you want to begin? Where should we start?
Well, I think so similar to what we said about the other objections that we've been talking about, the money objection 99% of the time is a smokescreen for something else. So we have to know that going in, because we all get the money objection. And I don't know if you guys have noticed this, but it really doesn't matter what price point your program is at, because people get the money objection if they have a $20K program. They get the money objection if they have a $200 program, and they even get the money objection over, $19.99 membership programs. So
Right.
This is a clue for you guys that it's not about the money, it's about something else. So I think that's the place to start.
Yeah. And just to give a couple examples, like people buy things all the time that they don't have the money for. Like anytime you take out a loan to buy anything, you're buying something without the money, not without having the money. So like you buy a house, guess what? You're hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt if you did a 20% down, unless you bought it all cash. When you buy a car, people buy cars all the time that they don't have the money for, that they can make the payments, so that they do that. Some people go into debt for that. People buy clothes all the time and put it on a credit card. People go to school, take out student loans. People buy things all the time that they don't have the money for. And we've also had people buy our programs with like $0 in the bank, and they take out a business loan because they're business owners and they want to do that. So after working or doing this for so many years, especially over the last 6-8 months, we really kind of like fine tune this. But let's go through what some of those smoke screens are. So what have you noticed, Rachel? Like if it's not money, what is it actually?
I think it comes down to one of 3 types of uncertainty, either uncertainty towards you personally.
Yep.
If you haven't done your job to kind of instill trust in your prospect, just, as a person with integrity, as someone who's going to deliver, that's one type of uncertainty.
Let me expand there, because there's 2 types of trust that we talk about.
Okay.
People need to trust you from a value standpoint, like what you just said, in your integrity, who you are as a human being, and I know for a fact that if people don't like you, they will not buy, even if they think that you can solve their problem.
Right.
Number 2, or your team or your salesperson as well. Number 2, this is the one that's usually overlooked, is they have to trust in your ability to solve the problem. It doesn't matter how much they like you, if they don't believe in your ability to solve the problem, they will not buy.
Right.
So number 1 is trust, right?
Exactly. And that's uncertainty in your process, right? And what you do and how you do it. And then the last one is uncertainty in themselves. Because
Mm,
sometimes people don't believe, people think, listen, Brandon, you're amazing. Your process is amazing. I don't know if I can do it. I don't know if I can be successful.
right. What do you do
So,
when you find that out?
I mean, I think the easier ones to overcome is the trust, right? The two aspects of trust, because to me that's, you can improve on your skill as a salesperson to convey the value of your process, your methodology. You can improve your own skills about on how you portray yourself and build trust and rapport. The difficult one to overcome is someone's uncertainty about themselves. That's a tough one to overcome, in my
Right.
opinion.
Yeah. I always do. I always go to what happens if they don't, So like you can ask questions like, and this is kind of the tie downs that we do at the end of the call. Like, here's our process. Does the process seem like it's something that you need? Yes, blah, 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 blah. And then you go through the product. Does the product sound like it's something you need? Yes, it is. Okay, great. And then you get to the point where you're like, well, I don't know if I can do it. And I say, well, what's going to happen if you don't do it?
Right.
And they go like, well, and they just recite the problems again. And I say, so do you want to go back to having those problems? Because we know you can have those problems. You can do that. We know you can have those problems. You're really good at it. That's why we're on the call.
Proved that.
Yeah, you've
Yes.
proved that already. And then they go, well, they go like, it's just, but nothing's like, and we get this a lot too. The next question that they usually go to is like, I'll ask them like, if this was guaranteed, would you do it? Like if it was guaranteed that you were going to get the results and it would work, would you do it? And they usually will say like, yeah, but you don't have a guarantee. There's no guarantee it would work. And I say, you're exactly right. But you know what is guaranteed? That if you don't do it, you're going to go right back to where you were. And we all know you don't want that because you're on the call. So I always like flip it. Like, where's the
Yeah.
guarantee? I don't trust myself. And I always bring it back to the problems is like, well, then what you're saying is you're okay dealing with this. And if you are, then you shouldn't join the program. And
I
usually for
like
me, that snaps people.
I like that a lot. I'm actually going to use that in the way that you said it. I don't say it
Mhm.
in that way, but I like that because you're right that what has already occurred is guaranteed to repeat unless we change our action. So
Right.
even if it's not with me necessarily, when I'm on a sales call, I'll hold someone's feet to the fire in the sense that, look, what kind of person are you going to be? What kind of
Right.
business owner are you going to be? The kind of business owner who just keeps repeating the same old, hoping, crossing your fingers that this time it's going to work? Or are you going to take that leap, right? And even if it's not with us, something has to change.
Right. And
The
that could be true for any business, by the way. Like it doesn't have to be a money related business like ours. It could be like life coaching, or if you work with, like I just had a
relationships.
relationships. So if you're like a marriage therapist and like, well, how do I know you're gonna be able to get us the results? And it's like, well, I don't know. I don't know like what your work ethic is. I don't know who you are. I don't know
Right,
like how serious you guys are going to take it. But I do know that what's guaranteed is that nothing is going to change in your relationship if you do not do something about it. That is
right.
guaranteed. That's the only thing that's guaranteed in all this.
Right. And the other thing, a lot of times I will bring people back to the fact that, when you ask, well, how do I know if it's going to work for me? That when you're in that place, like it sounds really vague. I don't know what this is going to look like. I don't know how it's going to work. And then I bring people back to like the very simple process, which is, listen, if you come to calls, right? If you don't come to calls, it's not going to work for you. I can actually guarantee that. If
Right.
you don't do the work, it's not going to work. But if
Right.
you come to calls, you follow the process, and you raise your hand when you get stuck, then why wouldn't it work for you if it's worked for hundreds and sometimes thousands, depending on your how long you've been doing this, right? If it's worked for thousands of students, why would it not work for you?
Right. Yeah. I like that one too. And honestly, I mean, I feel like with any program, that's usually what it is. Is like when people don't get the results, it's because they just didn't show up to the level of other people. Is usually what it is. And like 90% of the cases, that's usually what it is a lack of showing up. So that makes a lot of sense.
That
Now,
lack of showing up is really, I think that's a really interesting thing that people don't necessarily think about in advance. I've seen it inside of our programs too, when someone doesn't show up. and we call them out. And we're like,
Right.
why are you not showing up? You're not going to get the results if you continue to not show up. And when they acknowledge that and they can see that about themselves and they start showing up, sometimes it's a matter of days or weeks before they skyrocket their results just because of how differently they carried themselves inside of the program.
Right. Yeah. And it's nice to frame that even beforehand when they even becoming, before coming into your program. It's always good to even frame that on the call. It
Right.
changes the way and how they show up and obviously the results you can get for people in your program.
Totally.
So let's get into like how to overcome this, some questions that you ask and things like that. Let's start with like the very logical part of this. For me, like a good tie down and a good
Yeah.
discovery process can help overcome these really well. So just as a reminder, what a tie down is like after we go through the discovery is a series of questions that we can use to pull more data, help us overcome objections, understand their scenario. Then we move into a tie down. A tie down is where we go through our process, not the product, not like module one, da, da, da. It's phase one, phase two, phase three. You say in phase one, we're going to overcome these problems. You just repeat back what they told you earlier in the call through all of them. And then you ask, is this process feel like something you need and will solve the problems you're having? Yes, great. So they just said yes to the process. And he said, here's how we do the process. We go through, and now you go through the product. We have this product, we have one-on-one calls, this and that. Again, we don't go through modules. It's more of like the way we ensure you do the process is a series of one-on-one calls, group calls every 2 weeks. You kind of go through like where the support is. Does that product sound like it's going to help you do the process, like implement the process? Yes. Okay, great. So they said yes to the process, yes to the product. Then you present it. Usually when people have money objections, like we talked about before, one of the big reasons is because they lack in the trust in your ability to solve it, which means they don't trust the process, which means you didn't do a great tie down. So when you present the offer and they're like, well, I don't know if I'm going to be able to get results, I don't trust myself. Usually a really good tie down to the process is what will help overcome that, because you can always just go, well, you told me the process is what you need. Like what is broken in the process that's causing you to not trust in that? And then what might come up is, oh, I don't trust in my ability. And then we can get, that's usually where it goes. I don't trust myself to do it. I know the process works. I don't trust myself. And it's like, well, what are you dealing with right now? Or what if I gave you a guarantee, would that be helpful? Yes, it would. Well, I can't do that. What I can do is guarantee that nothing will change. And that's kind of how I handle that whole thing. So I don't know if there's something you want to add to the tie downs or not, but usually a good tie down gives you some ammo to be able to overcome that first part of the money objection from my experience.
So what is the question you ask? How do you transition from you did the tie down and then the money objection came up. And so let's say you did the tie down and I said, yeah, I feel like this is like, I'm a 9 out of 10 sold on this process. And then you told me the investment. And then the next thing I say is, oh, that's a lot. I can't do that right now. How do you transition now?
To what?
To figuring out, to helping them shift out of that or figuring out what is the uncertainty.
Well, so because we're a money-based product, like we can be a money-based product, I always position the price as, I don't even tell them the price. I tell them in clients. So in the discovery, I'll say, what's the price for your product? Oh, $2,000. Okay, great. So now when I get to the pitch later, I say, good. Now the price of the product, it's just getting you 5 clients. Do you think I can get you 5 clients over the course of like 6 months? And they go, yeah. I'm like, great, because if I can, you get all of your money back, but I can probably do more. I know we're going to be able to do more. And you're going to continue that after the 6 months of the program. So this has a lifelong ROI. And then
That's very interesting.
you can see the wheels turning, because then it's like, silence for a little bit. And then like, so the product's $10,000. Like,
Right.
Yep.
That's
Like, yeah.
interesting because I never did it that way. I'm going to experiment with that.
Sometimes it works out that way, but if they tell me it's like a $47 membership, then I don't, because it's like, no, I got to get you 200 memberships, which I know I can do, but it's easier if they have a high ticket themselves, because then it's like, do you think I can get you 2 people? Like if the answer is no, then this is not the right fit. If the answer is yes, then this is a no brainer. So I always lead. That's how I start
Interesting.
that. Does that answer
I
the question?
do, yes, I do bring up that math. Like if you're selling an ROI based product, that math is very important to know. So you have to have done the due diligence in the discovery phase. You have to have asked those questions so you know the math
Yeah.
in order to bring that up at this point. I usually drop the investment, and then when they hesitate, I'll say, but really you only need two clients to make this back. Do you honestly think
Right.
we can't help you? But I also will do a double tie down in that moment.
Mm,
Before I do the math thing, I will do the question of, okay, so money aside for a moment,
mm,
are you 2 feet in?
right.
Because it might be
And you
that
do
they
that after you
said
reveal the price, right?
yes, because
Okay.
it might be that they said they were a 9 out of 10 on the process, but they're not.
Mm,
So I have to like this is one of the ways I figure out, is it the process? Is it me? Is it them? Like how do I figure that out?
I see. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense.
What would you
So
do if it were not an ROI based product?
yeah, that's hard because I don't know. Like it doesn't, there's not a lot of experience. Well, I do know what I would do, and that moves us to like discovery. So I would do something
Yeah.
in the discovery to overcome that. So let's just move there. So have a really good tie down and a process explanation, and that is the first step. Number two is we need to start asking more questions in the tie down process. So some of the stuff that I would probably ask in the discovery is like, okay, what are your problems? And then after they tell you the problems, I would say, how much time do you think you're spending on this problem, like per week? Like how big of a problem is this going on? How much time are you dedicated to it? Number one. And then I would ask them, okay, great. How much is your time worth? So
Mm,
if it's a medical thing, it's like, look, I'm spending like 5 hours a week just like researching what products to eat or what's going to be a healthy alternative to Western medicine or I don't know, whatever it may be.
sure.
Like, okay, five hours a week. What's your time worth to you? It's worth like $50 an hour. And if they're like, I don't know what my time's worth, I would say, look, if I came to you and said, I need you to consult with me in my business or something, and I need your expertise, what would you charge me per an hour for consulting?
Mm,
I'll charge like $100. Okay, great. So then when I get to the end and they're like talking to me about price and I go, look, you're spending 10 hours a week on this problem. You told me that you would charge $100 an hour. That's what your time's worth. You're spending $1,000 potentially a week on this problem. And the only guarantee is that you're going to continue having it if you do nothing. And we're going to, for $10,000, get this fixed, which means if you try to figure this out for another 10 weeks on your own, you're losing money after that. And it's still not even going to be fixed probably. So that's usually how I would go with it is how much time are you spending on this? How much is your time worth to you? But I would also ask things like, how much longer are you willing to like deal with this problem? Like if
mm.
you knew this problem wasn't going to get fixed on its own and you had to like give up everything you owned in order to fix it, how would you go your entire life with this problem? Would you like how long are you willing to deal with this? And that's going to give some more ammo too, because then you can get to the price of like, well, how long is it going to take you to pay off $10,000?
Right.
You know, oh, it's going to take you 2 months. Well, you said you're not willing to deal with this for another month. You know, you can start to ask a lot of the questions like that to position it differently.
Right. And I think so when you're selling an ROI based product, it's a lot easier to do
It
this
is.
part of the discovery because it's just really
Mm-hmm.
simple math. Like what are you making now? What do you want to make? That gap is what it costs you on a monthly basis to not figure this out. But
Right.
when it comes to things like health or relationships, you still have to quantify the cost of inaction. And it's a little
Mm-hmm.
trickier, but you do have to do it because people don't want to look at that. They don't
Right.
want to look at it on purpose because what you're asking them to do at the end of the day is take money out of their bank account. And
Right.
right now, they don't realize that that money, quote unquote money, is coming out of some kind of bank account. It might be coming out of their actual bank account. Most
Right.
likely, it's coming out of their emotional bank account.
Mm.
So you have to somehow quantify that for them. And a lot of times, specifically, I know with relationships, because that's what I do in my own business, we kid ourselves that if I don't do anything, everything's just going to stay the same. So, like, it's hard right now, but I'm somehow duct taping it together. And part of my job as a salesperson on the call is to help people see that no, that's not true. The
Right.
longer you wait, the harder it is to get back on track because things stack up, especially when it comes to relationships. Things
Right.
stack up and problems become bigger. So,
Right.
3 months, maybe you don't see the difference between now and 3 months from now, but wait
Right.
6 months, wait a year, wait 3 years, and then it's going to be exponentially harder for you to
Well,
get back on track.
also with relationships too, there is a cost involved. It's like, look, if your relationship doesn't work out, the next step is divorce, and divorce is very expensive.
Oh, yeah.
So it's like, cool, if you don't get this fixed, nothing's going to change, which ultimately lead to divorce, right? How expensive do you think a divorce is? Like, wouldn't it be worth paying $10,000 to like really sit down and figure this out? And then, and then you could say, and hey, if you end up getting divorced anyways, you're gonna have to split that cost anyway. So it's really only costing you $5,000. But there is always a cost. Like you're right. It's either a monetary cost or it's going to be an emotional cost or an energy cost or a time
Right.
cost. And you have to
Yes.
compare that to the monetary cost of the product, the
And
program.
you have to hold people accountable to their own values, right? To their own integrity, because we all say, my family is the most important thing to me, or
Right.
my business is a priority for me right now, or my health is a priority for me right now. And then when it comes to the moment of making a decision, we don't act in integrity with those values.
So
So
good.
part of what you need to do is hold people, accountable to their own
So,
values.
so if we go back to, let's just the relationship example, and you like in the discovery, you would add in a values, like what's really value, like where your values align, like what's your number one value? Is it family? Is it this, that? And they tell you
Mm,
family. You put that in the discovery. When you get to the price, you would say something like, so you're telling me like your number one value is family, but you're not willing to invest in your number one value. Are you sure money's not your number one value? And then it's like, whoa, you're prioritizing money over your family. That
right.
can move some people. That's
Right.
good.
And one way I ask it is when they tell me what their goal is, I ask, okay, well, why is that important?
Mm,
Why is that important to you? To
right,
have to find your soulmate, to have a good relationship with your children, or whatever the case may be in the case of relationships. Why
right,
is that important? And that's
right.
when values come out, right? And that's when people get connected with why it is that they're on this call in the first place.
Mm, that's good. So I'm going to bring this up because I know there's going to be some people there and be like, well, isn't that manipulative to use their values against blah, 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 blah. And what's your response to that? Because I have a response, but I know some people are going to be like, well, that's pretty manipulative and da 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 to use their values against them to join your program. And what would you, how would you respond to that?
So honestly, for me, I don't know. I'm pretty sure you're the same, but when I get on a sales call, it's not about joining a program. Like at the end of the day, I'm pretty detached from that outcome if I make the sale or I don't make the sale. Where I come from when I show up on a call is I want to figure out if I can help you. And if I can, it's my
Yeah.
job to convey that to you and hold you to that so you can make the best decision for you. And at the end of the day, if I don't get the sale, like I don't dwell on that. It's
Right.
not on my mind. So
I think,
I feel manipulation is about intention
yeah,
more than
the
actual.
intention comes from an idea to help them. It's
Right.
not about closing the sale. I mean, it is and it isn't.
Right.
We want to close the sale because we want to help and we
Yes.
want and I
Yes.
wouldn't be saying that to someone I didn't think we could help, number one. But number
Right.
two, most of you listening are coaches.
Mhm.
And understanding someone's values is incredibly important as a coach. So that whole thing of like using values to get them to become aware of what they're doing or how they're making decisions or what they're doing in their life and reminding them their values is a coaching technique or process you would use in coaching. And it's no difference than on a sales call. The only difference is you're getting them to understand their values in order to make better decisions to get the help that they need. And I think a lot of people go like think that when you start if you use that technique or tactic, that it's an automatic yes from the person, like you're brainwashing them. It's like The hell? You get so many no's still by doing that because people won't move out of their
Right.
stuff.
Most people will say no, which is normal. And and this is the other piece of it, like what you said, to piggyback off of what you're saying, part of your job as a coach is to understand the perception, the limiting belief that
Yep.
people have about themselves, right? And your job as a coach is to pull that out and, kind of hold it up like a mirror so people can examine their own limiting beliefs and their own
Yeah.
perceptions and see, oh, actually, that's a little distorted, right? So that's something you do as a coach anyway, is you
Right.
hold people accountable to their own values and to be in integrity with what they said they wanted.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I agree, fully in that. And that's what great messaging is too. Like even with thought reversals, it's identifying what does someone believe that's causing suffering in their life and how do we show the flaws in that to help them make better decisions or to a better path. And that's really what it is like revealing here's the flaws in the thinking that you don't see. And I'm going to reveal those flaws to you so that
Yeah.
you can make a more educated decision on getting the help you need or if we're a right fit or not a right fit is kind of what we're going for here.
Someone once asked me, when I said that we talk a lot about people's problems and in their language and exactly what they're going through, someone once said something about it. Isn't that kind of like, fear mongering or just like putting things, making people feel like they're in a worse situation than they actually are? And the reason I think it isn't, this is exactly this same point.
Right.
People already have these fears.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's
exactly.
true that I'm calling them out, but people already have the fear. Like I can't implant a fear in someone if it doesn't already exist there. I can
No.
call it out and make them take a look at it from a different perspective. And I think that is helpful.
Well, it goes back to the intention. It's
Right.
we are business owners and we're here to solve a problem.
Right.
And in order to get someone into our circle so we can help them, they need to know that we actually understand their problem. They need to trust us that we understand the problem. They need to trust that we know how to solve the problem. How on earth do you gain that trust and rapport if you don't talk about the problem? It's impossible.
Yes.
And so this is also where good conversation meets people where they're at. So like when your spouse, kid or whatever's upset, the worst thing you can do is start at the solution. Oh, you'll be fine. Just calm down. Like that's the end goal. You want them to be fine and to calm down, and they will eventually. But the fastest way to get there is to validate what they're going through, to make them feel heard. And that's the exact reason why we talk about problems, is to validate, know that it's okay. I understand what you're going through. It's a healing practice. So it blows my mind when people don't want to talk about problems because they actually think that you're like being manipulative
Negative.
or hurting
You're being too
someone.
negative.
You're being too negative. You're doing the opposite. And so when you think that, it tells me how terrible of a communicator you are, that you think you're not allowed to talk about problems when talking about problems is the most validating thing for the person who's going through the problem. It's so healing for people. And when people don't get it, I'm just like, oh man, you're just going to struggle with messaging and you're just not a great communicator. I can already tell if that's where your thinking is because it's necessary. Like with my kids, the number one thing I do to get them to calm down is validate their experience the moment it's happening. Like they're screaming, having tantrum. I hug them. I say, here's what you're going through and it's not fair and it sucks. Cry, like go ahead and cry. And you know how fast they slow down? It's 10 times faster. I don't have to tell you this. You already know this, but anyways, rant over. I'll let you add to it if you want.
Parenting session over.
Yeah. Therapy session over. But do you want to add to that or should we move on to some more questions to ask in the discovery?
Let's move on to more questions on the discovery.
Okay. So I have a list. Do you want to go through some of the ones you have or do you want me to continue with mine? What do you think would be best?
No, you continue with yours and I'll piggyback on them.
Okay. So the next thing I asked in discovery to overcome this money objection is also how painful are certain things. So I would say, what problems are you going through right now? On a scale of like 1 to 10, how painful is this for you? And then I sometimes can even ask, I don't have to, but I'm just thinking if you're not a money related product, some of the pains you can ask are emotional pains, energy pain. You can go through like how painful emotionally is this for you? Energetically, how draining is it? Just go through the different things like mentally, physically, whatever. Because depending on your business, like you may be
Right.
helping people with physical problems, emotional problems, energy. But I always will ask the energy and emotion problems no matter what it is, because those always exist. So it could be like, how much money do you think you're losing every month by not getting this problem fixed? How taxing emotionally is that for you? Like on a scale of 1 to 10. How much energy are you spending on a scale of 1 to 10? If you had that energy back every month, like what would you be doing? How much more
Ooh,
money
I
would you
love
be
that one.
making?
I
Yeah.
love that one. How much, what would you be doing if you had the time, energy,
Yeah.
money back? Love that.
Yeah. Because then when they get to the money objection, it doesn't even matter what it is. Like they're
Right.
like, man, if I could just get my health figured out, I could like go kayaking and I can spend time with my kids and I can do that stuff. Then you can ask them like at the very end, hey, it's $10,000 to join. And then they're like, oh, it's just too much money. I said, yeah, but like you said that this is what your life would look like if you got this problem solved.
Yeah.
Is $10,000 worth that? Like to go kayaking with your kids and have more time and take them on hikes every single day and not have to take naps on the couches. Like, is that worth $10,000 to you? Because these are memories you have for the life, their life. And this is memories they're going to have for their life. You're going to set like different values inside of them that they're going to have with their kids. Like,
Right.
is that worth $10,000 to you? And you can just frame it as like, it might not be, and that's totally fine. I just want to bring some different perspective for you to make a better decision on whether this is the right fit for you or not. So I like that follow-up question too, because then it kind of takes it off of like being a pressury salesman. It's like, look, if the answer is no, that's totally fine, but I just want to give you an alternate perspective here.
I love that. I love that. And then when most people will say, yes, of course it's worth 10,000, it's worth more than that.
Right.
Then I transition from there into, so is this a question of should you do it, or is it a question of how do you do it? Right?
Yeah.
Like, remember last time, if you guys remember in the previous episode, we said that sometimes objections are actually just surface level. You do have to
Mhm.
find out, is it just the surface level thing, or is there something deeper? And
Right.
that question can help you figure that out.
Right. Yeah. One of the things we talked about before is not ever doing discounts. And do you ever sell using a discount?
Never. I don't sell using a discount, and I don't sell using a deposit.
Okay.
I know
So
people do that.
I
I know
do,
people give deposit. I never give a
I do
deposit.
the deposit one. I'm like, it's just a
Why?
$1,000 deposit today. It just makes it easier. Like we did an event years ago and we sold our $10,000 product program. And I just said it's $10,000. Go to like the back of the room, sign up, blah, blah, blah.
Mhm.
It was an in-person event. We had
Oh, I was
no,
there.
you were the
I
one in
was.
California?
Yeah.
Oh, how funny. So then I don't know if you remember this. We made that offer and then no one signed up. We had no sales on day one. And I was like, oh,
No kidding.
I don't know what to do. So then on day number two, I talked to James that night and he was like, oh, we did this at our event. And we had so many people sign up. I said, I repitched it and I said, if you want it, it's a $500 deposit, non-refundable deposit. You put your credit card information down. We'll charge you $500 today. That's it. That's just $500 to save your spot. We only have 10 spots. And I said, then what we'll do is the remainder of the balance we'll charge you for 2 weeks. So you don't have to worry about it for 2 weeks. You can figure out what to do, go make some sales, get a loan, borrow it, whatever you need to like liquidate some stocks. I don't care. Like whatever, 2 weeks, you don't have to worry about for 2 weeks. And then we ended up selling out that day. Like people just went back and just deposit. I think psychologically there's something going on where there's like a $10,000 thing or a $500 thing that you pay today and you can worry about the remainder later. So the fact that it was like later and a smaller thing, psychologically, it just did something. So sometimes I'll use that on the sales call. I'm like, look, it's just $1,000 today, and we'll start your 6 months when your first payment comes in. Julie, reach out. Could be a week or two. Like we'll give you like a 2 or 3 week buffer, which means you can get started. And we'll figure out the payment stuff later. So it's just $1,000 to like get this all solved today. I'm like, okay, yeah, I'll do that. So I do it sometimes, but I don't discount.
I don't do the deposit. I'll tell you why, because I don't like I don't like how it positions us in terms of cash flow. It screws you up with cash flow if you don't have enough leads. So for you and your business, that's probably not a problem. But for
No,
people
yeah.
who are, in the beginning and earlier stage entrepreneurship, who are not making, seven figures and beyond, it can screw up your cash flow if you let them in with too little of a payment.
Yeah, I can see that. So here's what the Culvers do is they do a $3,000 deposit.
Right.
And the reason why they do a 3,000 is the reason Dan told me is because he knows the expense of what they're
Yes,
going to
that's the
take.
cost acquisition.
Yeah, so the $3,000 covers the expense that they're going to
Right.
take on to onboard and to do
Right.
all that stuff.
Right.
I'm okay operating at a loss for a little bit because but it all comes back to you. Like you're
Yes,
going
it
to be
does.
positive at some point. We have enough in the bank to sustain that.
Right.
But also we have money coming in from other places too. So it's not just
Right.
dependent on this one
Right.
product for us. But also that it's also just a temporary thing. So if you're making consistent sales, all the reoccurring will stack up after like 2 or 3 months, and you'll just have massive amounts of reoccurring every month,
Hmm.
which is nice. So it is a
Which is a good
temporary
thing.
thing,
Yes.
but it does mess. You're 100% right that it messes up cash flow if you're not careful with it for sure.
Right. So the way I deal with it on sales calls is that's when I offer the payment plan. Because honestly, like the payment plan, even into our program, like it's not that far off
Right.
from 1,000. You know what I mean? Like it's not a
Yeah.
huge stretch.
Right. Yeah. One of the things you could do, this might be a little manipulative and tricky, but you can do it. Is so if you say $10,000, I've never done this. This is just something that popped in my head. It'd be interesting to try. You say $10,000 and they go, that's too much. And you say, well, what can you do today? Like, what would not be a lot of money? And they go like, well, I could probably do like 7,000. And you go like, okay. So if you can do seven, you can do another three. Like get them to say a number and say like really $3,000 is what's the difference. Like three. So now the conversation's not even about $10,000 now. Now the conversation's about $3,000.
So
So
what
you're
you position that $3,000 against is the outcome that they want. So you're
yeah,
telling me you're willing to forgo that outcome for
yeah,
$3,000. So it's not even worth $3,000 to you. So right. So now you've taken it
yeah.
out of is it worth 10,000 to is it worth 3,000?
It's a smaller frame. So I've never done that. It just popped in my head right now.
Well, I like that.
I'm gonna try that.
I'm gonna try that too.
Just see what happens. What could you do today? And the reason why I say it's a little manipulative, because when you ask them what can you do today, they might be thinking, oh, I'm gonna get it at a discount now, but you're
Right.
using it like, well, so now what you're telling me is you're not gonna get this problem solved, and yada yada yada. So you still use the same conversation, but now it's over three instead of 10, which is easier to snap people for sure. Okay, so some more of the questions that I ask in discovery or to get over the money objection are, have you tried fixing this on your own? And the reason why I ask that is because when I, ask those questions of like, what's guaranteed is that you won't get the results on your own. And they go, well, I could. I'm like, look, you've said you've been trying to solve this for a year on your own already. So it is guaranteed that how many things have you tried? How many courses? And then the other question is like, how many courses have you tried to take? How many attempts have you tried this or something like that? Is another one helpful thing to overcome off of the money objection. Do you use that one?
How many courses? What have you
Well, have,
tried
have you
before?
tried fixing it on your own and how long has it been?
I have used that, but I don't think I've tied it back into the money objection. Like I ask that question more from the perspective of, well, what's going to change?
Right.
I use that more for like the casting the doubt
Right.
as to whether or not they can solve this on their own. And I'll say to people sometimes kind of directly, listen, if you could figure this out on your own, you would, because you're clearly very intelligent.
Right.
You're well spoken, you're articulate, like I can tell, you're smart. You would have figured this out if you could. But the
Yeah.
fact that we're here should tell you that it's time to try something else, right?
That's great too, because if they disagree, then they're essentially saying they're not smart.
Right.
So like you're a smart person. If you would have figured it out on your own, you would have. That's not true. What, are you saying you're not smart? That's a little tricky. That's a tricky one, Miss Duffy. I like it. Okay, so another Well, yeah. So I see what you're saying with that one. For me, that one's not directly tied to money. Like I don't go like money objection. Well, you've tried on your own. I know where I'm going to go with the money objection and I know it's going to come up. And so I just kind of ask it to keep it in my back pocket if I need it.
I also ask, like, so for me in my programs, because it's about parenting, like we should think about how to adapt this for other businesses. But in my business, I'll say something like, listen, you know those times when you're watching your kid and they're about to make like a colossal mistake. You know
Mm,
this as a parent, right? They're about to
yeah.
do something that is not gonna pan out. And you have to kind of, you could prevent a mistake. You could prevent a lot of pain. Sometimes it's physical pain you have to prevent, right? If your kid is
Right.
about to like jump off a cliff, you got to stop them.
Do you though?
I mean, ideally, in an ideal world, you would.
You can see our parenting styles coming out and conflicting. Like if they're going to die, yeah. But if they're going to get like cuts and bruises, yeah.
Right. If they're going to I personally don't stop if it's cuts and
Okay.
bruises. But you know what? But my kids sometimes, like, so I have one of my kids skis on the very edge of the cliff, literally, like there's a quarter of an inch between him and the edge of the cliff. So I got to
Yeah.
stop that because
Yeah.
the potential downside there could be really
No.
catastrophic, right?
Yeah. So I know we're getting off on a tangent here, but I love the quote from Dr. Peterson.
Yeah.
Um, and he says something like, I might botch it a little bit, but it's like, you have to let kids do dangerous things safely or something like that.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
that's what it's all about, I think.
Totally. Okay, but where I was going with this to begin with was that I tell parents, that experience of like, that if your child were just willing to accept your help, that you could help them avoid some, big mistake.
Right.
Most parents know this experience really well, that like your kid is just insisting and being really stubborn on doing things their own way instead of letting you help them.
Hmm.
And then I'll tell them, you know, that's us right now.
Mm.
That's us right now. You are holding on to your desire to do things your way, and I can help you
Hmm.
if you let me. So, why did I bring that up at this point? Is because it dovetails into that question that you were asking of how long have you been trying to figure, what have you tried, and how long have you been trying to do this by yourself,
Right.
right? Like at some point, you have to make a decision to let somebody else who's been there, who's had experience, who does this for a living, you have to let somebody help you.
Yep. And I didn't realize it until this moment, but also what that does is it sets you up for a follow-up sale, which I think a lot of people don't realize is that a lot of sales
Yeah.
come up from follow-up where someone will say no now, but
Yes.
they will buy in 2 to 3 months. Why? Because nothing has changed. And
Right.
so, the sales program that we're in right now, they talked about that. They said like half your sales once this gets up and running will come from follow-up.
Yeah.
Meaning the people that said no to you 2 or 3 months ago, you follow up, you reach back out, ask how things are going, get on another call. Now they're ready to go. And I think we're both thinking the same person. There was someone who we almost sold and got into the program like at the beginning of like almost at the end of the year. And then
Hmm.
when our launch came through, they finally came in. A lot of people are actually that way
Yep.
is like they see the offer, they know the price, and then you position how long you've been trying to fix this, and you have to make that a point. How long you've been doing this? How much longer are you willing to do it? Do you think you're gonna be able to do it on your own? The answer to that is probably not. And then you follow up 2 or 3 months later. It's like, how has it gone on your own? Same spot.
Right, because
How do we get on the call?
especially for those of you who are, I mean, I'm assuming most of the people listening to this episode, like we said, are coaches. And as coaches, we all know it's actually not so much about information, it's more about implementing that information correctly
Hmm.
in your circumstances, right? In your
Hmm.
business, in your family, in your life, whatever it is that you coach people through, it's about implementation, less so about information.
Yeah.
So when people don't let you help, it's sometimes just like with little kids, sometimes you got to let them fall a little
Oh yeah.
bit and hurt
Yeah.
themselves before they will accept your help.
Yeah. And that's what I have to do with my kids is just to get rid of arguments. I don't want to do
Right.
that way, Dad. Okay, go ahead. And then I just tell them like, if you want to actually get the result, this, whatever it may be faster, then like, I'm here, just let me know. And sometimes
Yeah.
they do, sometimes they don't. There was something I was going to add to that and I don't remember what it was. Shoot. It was so good. Um, all right. Maybe it'll come.
But you know, just to add to the follow-up thing, I've had people say to me, I'm a definite no. No
Mhm.
thanks, not for me, not interested. Thank you for your time. Like a definite hard no.
Yeah.
And I've gone back to them and they're in the program.
Yeah. Or Brandon sells them. They get on the call with me.
Well, that sometimes happens too. But even
Or
like
vice
by
versa.
myself, but even by myself, like I'll reach back out to people who have said definitely no.
Yeah.
I think
Definitely no does not mean no. And I think a lot of people get
it
discouraged by
means
that.
not right now.
Yeah. There's so many things that happen in the follow up
Yeah.
that make it easier. And then also what we do too is like anytime you do something to the program, oh, that's what it was, the implementation. Keyword implementation. I'll come back to it. So, well, actually, I'll just go to it now because I just lost my train of thought on the other thing. I'm scatterbrained today. So that's a great selling point for anyone listening to the call. This is not the money objection, but we actually get the objection of like, I'm in so many courses and I'm in so many programs. I don't, how much material do I have to go through? And like, yeah, we have material, but I just want to make it very clear. This is not about you learning and doing, this is about helping you implement it. And the reason why a lot of programs don't work is because they don't have a dedicated system and process to working with you to get this implemented to your specific business.
Right.
And that's what this is set up to do.
Right.
And that's our major selling point between NGM and NGM Plus is people ask us like, is there more information? And da, da, da. Yeah, there is. Like we have webinar training and we have all this other stuff, but it's not about that.
Right.
You're in the program to do it yourself. And it's not about lacking the knowledge at this point. It's lacking the ability to implement it for your specific situation. And that's what the upgrade is about.
Right. And what I've noticed is a lot of time people think they're doing the work. They think they're implementing. I mean,
Right.
they are implementing in some way. They're just not implementing it the best way or correctly. And
Well,
then
even
they
if
don't get
it's
the
still a
result.
learning, it's still a learning process for the
True.
implementation. You know,
True. True.
it's like getting buying a course on how to ride a bike. It's like, cool, you have all the information, and then you're going to do so much better if you have an implementation coach who's been in Tour de France and is a mountain biker as well. Like just sitting there and telling all that stuff, you're just going to get faster results. It's just, it's just the way it works.
I still don't know how to ride a bike, by the way.
I know, it blows my mind. So Rachel does tandem bikes with her husband because
Yeah.
she doesn't know how to ride a bike. So you tandem mount. I don't even know how you guys do a tandem mountain bike. That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's wild. Do you guys do single tracks and all that stuff?
We
Or is it?
do, but some single tracks are too tight for the bike to
Yeah.
physically maneuver. So he kind of has to scope those out on his own first. Or we have to like stop and then like walk the bike
Oh, I see.
sometimes. Yeah.
That's just crazy. I don't think I'll ever get Jacqueline on a tandem bike.
We
That
could
would
do
be.
a whole episode about the life lessons and the marriage lessons in tandem bike riding.
I just got her an e-bike. I think that's good enough for now. I don't know if we're
Do you have
ready
to
for
know
that.
how to ride a bike to ride an e-bike?
Yeah, yeah, pretty well too.
Oh.
Because they take off. You usually get, it's
Oh,
like
really?
it's like a motorcycle. Can you ride a motorcycle?
I don't know. I never tried that.
Oh, I would imagine they're
I mean, I've ridden in the back because Scott used to ride motorcycles,
okay. I
but
would imagine if you ride a motorcycle, you could ride a bike and vice versa. So maybe start with a bike. Don't go buy a motorcycle and hop on. All right, let's go through a couple more of these questions. I just have a couple more. And for me, this one's relevant to our business, so it may not be relevant to all the listeners. But I always ask when they get done with the problems, another question I ask in the discovery is, how much money do you think you'd be making if you didn't have this problem? Or if you had this fixed? Like how much more money do you think you'd be making in your business if your messaging was figured out? Like what does that number look like? And that one's obvious because you just use that against them to win the prize. It's like, well, I asked you earlier, you think you make an extra $100,000 a year. So why are we worrying about the $10,000? Like if you trust the process, you trust me, and you think that I can deliver on fixing the messaging problem, like this is a no-brainer.
Right. That's a good question to reveal the uncertainty about themselves because that's probably I think for a lot of people that's where it's at. It's they're uncertain about is this I get like I like you, I understand the process. I don't know if this is going to work for me.
Right. Well, then you can always ask that question differently too. So you can always ask, do you trust this process to work for you? Do you trust my ability to get this done for you? So if you just add the simple like for you at the end of it, I think that could help overcome that objection too. Like I don't know if I can do it. Because it's always like, well, I asked you if you thought this would work for you, and you said, yeah. What changed?
Right.
So adding that little, I haven't done that. It's just, again, that's another thing that popped into
I like
my
that.
head.
I'm going to try that. And also, also reframing that fear because we all have those kind of, the moment, not all of us, but a lot of people have that moment just before they're about to invest in a big way. Nerves come up, fear does come up, right? That's a
Hmm.
normal human response. So I also sometimes call out and I say, listen, it's normal to be nervous. It's okay if you're, a little bit apprehensive, if you're a little bit nervous. Like I get it. You're on the cusp of something huge. You understand that, right? We both
Right.
understand that. And now, you're still required to move forward despite that.
Right. Yeah. Makes a lot of sense. And then the last question I have here is how long, which we might have already talked about, and how long are you willing to deal with it? How much is it costing you dealing with it now? So you
Yeah.
try to get them to make a monetary number to the problem, which for us, we don't have to do that because of the nature of our business. But again, a lot of people might have to do that. Coaches, subconscious coaches, love coaches, relationship coaches, you probably have to do that. Like, what is that costing you? And then compare that to the monetary value is usually the best way to overcome it.
Right.
I,
Right. Right.
I also find too, just like even sometimes just asking them like, oh, I can't afford it right now, and go like, well, what's really the issue? Because I'm sure you've bought things that you couldn't afford all the time, like your car, your house, and you like probably taking out a loan and you just paid it off over time. Like, why with that, and not this? Isn't this more
Right.
important than like a car or the car you're gonna forget about in 5 years?
And I think a lot of times as business owner, if we are doing our own sales calls, a lot of times business owners like, we have to start falling in love with the process of selling,
Mm.
not from the perspective of like I'm trying to sell someone, but from the perspective of this is how you help people. Like you got into this in order to have an impact on people. If you are resistant to the idea of selling someone on a call, your business is going to have a huge problem, huge.
Right. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I sometimes will also ask, I do this, with regards to the lack of trust in you personally. I will ask people, okay, well, out of all the messaging experts out there, why Brandon?
Right.
And that does come up. So all these, the reason we ask all these questions in the discovery phase is because the money objection is not a real objection.
Right.
Is because we know there's some uncertainty underneath. So this is how it all ties into the money objection.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, we're lucky that we get to have that monetary discussion though, like with what we do. It's a little bit easier. I've literally done calls where I was like, look, it's going to cost you two sales. Like, do you really think I'm not going to get you two sales? No, I do. I think you will. And like, well, if you think that, then like, this is a no brainer. And there's someone in the program who's there now because of that. They were like,
Yeah.
yeah, I know. All right. I'll join. I was like, okay, cool. All right. I mean, that's all I have on my list to overcome this objection. Is there anything you want to add or any questions or things you want to dive into before we wrap up?
No, I think this is good. And I think we, to recap kind of what we did, we looked mainly at the money objection in this episode, but really what we've been doing this entire series is trying to show you guys how to use messaging inside of your calls because, it is how you conduct your sales calls is a factor, a
Hmm.
fact. Yes, it's a factor of your messaging. So you have to bring it back into your messaging, which is why people come to you in the first place.
Right. It is. And we've even had people on the calls that like see an ad of ours to download a PDF and then they like get invited to book a call. We have our setter reach out to them, book them on a call. And sometimes you ask that question, like, why Brandon? Like, or I say, why me? And they're like, honestly, I have no idea who you are. I just like saw an ad, but the ad spoke to me. The ad called out my exact issues and what I was dealing with and what I was doing. And so I was like, this person knows what they're talking about. And like, so they're like, I'm not really sold on you per se, 'cause like, I don't really know you. And I was like, oh, okay. But again, that's a result of the messaging. The messaging was able to pull them in and
Right.
get its job done. You've even had people on calls that didn't like me. Wasn't there people that
Yeah.
were like, I
And I
don't,
still sold them in.
yeah. What did they say? So I can't remember exactly what they said, but it was something like, I'm not sold on Brandon or something like that.
I've had a few people say that.
Someone said they don't like the way I looked one time.
Yep. Someone
It's like,
said they
what does
don't
that
like,
have to do with the message?
I don't care for the way Brandon looks.
It's the weirdest thing I've ever heard in my whole entire life. We weren't asking about my looks. We were asking about if you trust my ability to solve the problem. Well, I don't know. I don't like the way he looks.
Well,
I'm
that
like,
exactly. I don't care for how Brandon looks. And I said to that, first of all, like I really had to like focus myself to not laugh in that moment because
yeah.
I thought this is hilarious. And I've never had that objection come up until that point.
Rachel's like, I know, I agree. I can't stand it either.
Because we said we have to validate first, right? We have
Yeah,
to meet
exactly.
people where they're at. So first,
He does look like a freaking
you
weirdo.
are absolutely right. Exactly. So first I validated,
Yeah.
but then I said, well, luckily for us, his looks don't determine, the results that he provides. So I shifted out of that and
Right.
then and she enrolled.
In NGM or NGM Plus? Because do you remember which one it was?
It was NGM.
Who was it? I'm going to kick him out right now. Full refund. You're out.
I don't remember her name. This was a while
So
ago.
funny. So weird. Just goes to show you that people will come up with the weirdest reasons to not buy, and it's your job to move them out of it.
People will come up actually with every reason to not buy. And back to the question, the earlier question on discounts, if you ask people what they would pay, what they want to pay for your program, they'd say zero. That's
Yeah.
what people want to pay.
Yeah.
They want to pay zero. So it doesn't matter how expensive or inexpensive your program is, how many discounts you give or don't give. People are always going to find any excuse to not take that step,
Right.
even if it's
Everything's
about
fine.
your looks.
Even if it's about your looks. You got to have a tough skin for this business, just so you know, because people will come at you. All the reasons they have are going to come out to the surface. All right, well, let's wrap up here because I think this is a pretty good job, and and at least it's the best job we can do because I don't know any other way to overcome that objection. And also, just know we kind of touched on it, a little bit today. If you do these objection busters that we talked about today, and people still know, it doesn't, like Rachel said, it just means not yet, and you still want to follow with them once a week, twice a week. In fact, I have 2 people now that have given me verbal yeses, and I still like haven't gotten their deposits in. It's been like a week, 2 weeks. So you need constant follow up, and they
Right.
get busy.
Follow up and
and-
nurturing, right?
yeah,
There's always people who are ready to hit the ground running, and then there's people who need a little more nurturing. There's nothing wrong with that, by the way. It doesn't
right.
mean they're going to be bad clients. It just means they need more time.
Yeah,
There's just different buckets of how people of buying patterns, right? Of how people buy. So when someone says no, you take it as a not yet, you continue to nurture them and you see.
yeah, yep, 100%. I actually think majority of our sales that we have people in the program probably come from follow up. Like unless they came through a launch, most of them
Right.
probably are follow up. It's not like you get off the call and then bam, they buy. Like it does happen, but follow up is like 70 to 80% of the time you need it, I think.
100%.
Okay, cool. Well, we'll wrap up here. So we have one more episode of the series left. We're still trying to figure out which objection we want to go through, or maybe what we could do is just a rapid fire one. Cause some of the objections we hear is like, I need to talk to my partner or spouse or something. I feel like we can overcome that one pretty quickly. But we'll just go to the table, see what else we have. And we either just dedicate an episode to one, or we'll just do like rapid fire on a few. So
Cool.
one more episode to go, coming out next week. Again, if you guys love this series, please let us know by sharing it, tagging me, sending me a DM. And then if you have not left us a review on iTunes, please head over, do that now. Love reading those, and it helps us just get more exposure on the podcast. The more exposure we have, the more we can do for you guys as well. So head over there, and we'll see you all on the next episode. Take care, everyone.
Hey guys, thank you so much for checking out another episode of the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, go below, hit the subscribe button, and make sure you click on that bell icon and get notified every time we drop a new episode. Now, if you're looking for the show notes, we have them linked underneath this video, as well as our social media handles and some links to free training and offers that we drop from time to time to help you guys even further. So go check those out if you're interested, and thank you so much for tuning in to the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast.